Hi. So I'm here with a few thoughts on Bill Cosby versus Hugh Hefner. Um, so these just so basically, I just finally was thinking about this like a day ago, and I was like, I've seen so many variations of this comment. Um, I would say, there's always a little bit of give and take with who's making comments online, but barring that, mostly black people and some rough men and women roughly saying it's something to the effect of, well, Hugh Hefner was giving chicks pills and stuff back then too. How come he didn't, face trial retribution, get taken down the way, a black man like Bill Cosby was? And so these are just a few sort of thoughts that do return back to that comment question, if you will, that I've seen, but then just a few things that kind of came out of just thinking about that being repeated and thinking about both of the men and their histories and situations kind of alongside of each other. So first, think of the Playboy Empire versus Cosby Land. Like both men are very famous and well known for the numerous branches of their work and entertainment. Um, Obviously, you can definitely Google for like the more fine details, but I'm just doing a very kind of broad overview survey just to make a couple observations. So in the roughest terms, think of Bill Cosby, I Spy, Fat Albert, The Cosby Show, and then some other projects and films and different things along the way. But I would say that those are kind of the apex of, like, the Cosby Show is kind of maybe the apex of his like career in a large sense in terms of what made him a true, complete, across the map household name. So, and when we think of that kind of coming along, I mean, he was definitely a familiar face and name prior to the 1980s for a variety of things. But if you take the Cosby Show in that era with each other and from there, then that's kind of how I'm framing that. So then Hugh, I mean, think about the Playboy Empire, just from the magazine, the club, the mansion, besides all the other avenues and different, places that, and things that Playboy has taken on and have done, that is within itself just a kind of gargantuan, empire based on that came out of Playboy and his creation. So then I guess the first observation then about the comparison between the two is, and this is just kind of a thought. Now, if you were some woman floating around, at the mansion, maybe you were some intermittent model, nude photography chick, and basically there was a larger structure to absorb women who may, I argue, because these are all, I don't want to get into like the legality of like, what was said was done to people, this, that. I just want to leave it really on the surface because the history's out there as far as the accusations that have been made against Bill Cosby, of course, and even how tangentially even Hugh in a couple places comes up in the same conversation. So I'm just arguing for the most part, especially when the image of the victims came out, and there's a few. I'm gonna just use the term women of color to just make a point that they all weren't white women or all weren't Asian women with a few, bits of chocolate scattered in there. Um, so I'm thinking it seems like more of the women that he may have come across where Playboy may have offered people like a brand. You could be a little bit feel jilted that you weren't Hugh's main thing, but here's a job at like one of the cocktail bars. Here's a little bit of preferential treatment for a spread in X magazine. Maybe, hang around here and be a bunny and just be a part of the atmosphere. It's a little bit of a job, a little bit of exposure. You'll meet lots of, people, men in this scene. Just think about the scene that Playboy, just the mansion itself, and Hugh Hefner, like that kind of environment that was cultivated, over a large period of time. So I'm just arguing or suggesting that, because I guess it's still, I can't certainly say this. So the question is, Bill Cosby, considering the fact that he was married, so we were to take race completely out of it, um, just maybe even take out, you can even take out what they do as careers, like a guy who, because for the most part, I mean, Hugh has been married on and off for over a period of years. I think when I looked him up, there's like 2 wives before, the famous, girlfriend era, the Holly, Kendra, and those girls. And I think he was married before he died, like actually married. Those weren't just like the 3 partners that he had at that period of time. So then there's just a level of difference in that way too. So for instance, a guy who's married, but then for large swaths, we know sometimes he wasn't married, so he could have a girlfriend or two, bounce him around, maybe put one up in a loft here, keep one there, you know, not being married, or even if he had been married, and maybe the wife just let him do whatever it is. Basically, there's different obligations and ways that probably both of them operated due to that fact, because Bill Cosby, I can't tell you how long, but has been married to she's a doctor too, I believe, Camille Cosby, for quite some time, like a number of years. And I'd imagine that, I don't know if that's his first wife or not, but the nature of having these kind of dalliances, or even like if he had been married at the time with them, but then he got married and these women were kind of floating around out here, was at the Cosby land, especially considering how black it was. Maybe not just insular, because again, Cosby's, kind of transmorphed out of just like being a black comedy show or black thing, and became this kind of like it still kind of is a bit Americana-ish in terms of what it still means to people today. So, so I'd argue that one reason that would definitely could use some empirical analysis. I'm just suggesting that some of the women who may have felt jilted, maybe he did kind of slip a drink or two, a pill or two. It was a kind of a culture. You sleep with Hugh, maybe get a little bit of a perk here, perk there. There's an empire to kind of absorb these women, a kind of a culture created around Playboy, the magazine, and the sexual, the pornography, the industry, that just had a place for people. Like they talk about, chicks or even guys to a certain degree, mostly women aging out, then they become like a director, or they become a makeup artist or something. Even for the women who that came forward for Cosby, it was like 20 women, 15, 20, 20, 30, whatever it was. Like, where could he absorb those women into some type of mechanism, some type of cultural output that is or was as profitable as something like Playboy, but then is not even a direct comparison. To see, I think already there kind of proves what I'm saying. It's different, even if you're saying that yes, they both were doing the same thing, allegedly applying people with drugs, having questionable, sex in terms of, you know, discretion, permission, someone being whatever. So that's just one thing that kind of came up too, is, there was some, I saw this once on like I think it was like probably Return of Kings or something like that. And there was just this analogy to the fact that the only guy is like a poor guy, or a guy that this creepier stalker is a guy who makes less than $40,000 a year that's into them. And just basically like women's, like, what they'll take or not take, or what's considered like, ew, gross, may vary upon certain factors like that. Like a creepy, like, well, think about goddamn the awful movie with the awful books, 50 Shades of Grey. Oh god, when I think about how awful it is, I just get sad, and I'm like, that book and that movie actually exists someplace. Anyway, so then just there's a difference between, I would argue, because Playboy and that vast empire could absorb a bunch of girlfriends. It was built around sex and dalliances. If he was maybe having a similar type of life or doing something similar, it may not have worked in Bill Cosby's favor, primarily because he was married most of the time and he couldn't, absorb like all these different girlfriends. The Cosby Land empire is relatively a black cultural output that gained a lot of popularity over time, and something to spin off a different world. But there was never an empire as big and as kind of open-ended, diverse as the Hugh Hefner Playboy empire. So then that leads to one of the finer points about this whole Bill Cosby thing, particularly when it comes to him and how everything came about. Now this I guess is where the race thing kind of pops his head in, but not really. Wouldn't it just have been simpler to like pay these women? Like, maybe, if he, like if it had been revealed that he saw a bunch of escorts or like, there's breaking news about that, how the Manhattan Madam, she's being like indicted in the whole Trump Cohen, whatever charge thing. Um, so, he used to see escorts a lot. Oh, okay. Somebody might go, oh, that's kind of this or that. He's been married all these years, whatever. But it would just be that, and there wouldn't be some lawsuit, the drugs. And so then there we go. So then this kind of comes back into the race thing. No, there's no way for me to know this about Bill Cosby, and I wouldn't assume to know what someone else is thinking, what their thoughts could be. But this has some basis in some things that I've heard or had expressed previously. Would it have felt as if, he's really making it, he's arrived, he's got all these hot young women, he's at a great Playboy mansion, and it's the culture, it's the times. Of course, they want to have sex and, get a little bit of this and that going on. And then all these years later, and it's, the Me Too, the whole sexual kind of like history reliving. I mean, there's a bit like from Harvey Weinstein, like Kevin Spacey, and that would be just a topic to sit with for like an hour and just be like, whoa, like, can you believe all those different like cases have like come about? And it's weird, after the whole Pizzagate thing, they kind of consumed the election. Then there's like this other kind of like sexual hysteria movement. Someone did this, and I don't know. But anyway, so that's probably, maybe had he just paid for it. So there you go. So that's, maybe this is a better way for me to kind of breach off of the comparison between Cosby Land and the Playboy Empire. Hugh Hefner was in essence paying for it by paying dividends for like being, connected to him by proximity to being on certain, being able to maybe get certain perks and features, or just be surrounded by, how many women might have met a guy that they kind of were, flirty wordy with there. Maybe they married them later, or they got a gig doing X, or whatever and so forth. And so he's kind of the puppet master of it because it's his creation, his invention. So then on the flip side, someone like Cosby, maybe a good friend for some time and hanging there, he's still a guy there. The women that are there for the setting is given by Hugh. The Playboy Mansion, the whole, culture around it is him. So he's like, so you're kind of, you plus the women are visitors into someone else's like, playpen. Um, so so then going back to originally why I was kind of prompted was like, well, why isn't like, Hugh Hefner getting, strung up or whatever? Well, maybe that reaches off the last point. They are inherently different. Because if someone met your creepy friend there, no, that's no. If you're the one that's steering the ship, so Hugh Hefner, you know, was the one steering the ship. It was his playpen, his den. I'd argue that a good chunk of women just had benefited from the proximity of being associated with him. And maybe if someone, maybe didn't really feel like giving a BJ, or they're like, hey, let's just do some pills. This guy can help me out. Let's get it on and have a fun night together, whatever. The Playboy Empire could probably absorb the women who happily just kind of went on with it. They had their dalliances with him. Maybe they've been a little under the influence and weren't too cool about it, or maybe it just came part of the culture. And with him, there were other benefits that side place that, well, he's old. I don't want to get off this guy, or I'm not really sure, but we're drinking and having some pills, and kicking it. Maybe I'll get like some new headshots out of this. I'll be able to like, be on his arm, or, oh, I was here and I come back and we party. And I mean, there's just a lot of other like factors that kind of have bearing. And I guess the key thing as far as with Bill Cosby and if there had been some type of side benefit. So maybe if you had questionable sexual experience, you weren't really too keen on it, but you were able to get some type of money, some type of fame, some type of, tangential benefit or influence. And at least the majority of those women had. I don't think maybe you would have had so many of them stack up within the past few years at the end to like, level this like big, judgment and, bring up all these like past stories to the forefront. Because everybody can say, oh, these women, they all B-listers, they this, they're that. But the funny thing is, like, even the two really notable girls that he was with, the Kendra and the other one, now she's had that kind of really weird family drama surrounding her. But the rest of them sold like a little book. They become household names. And again, like it's not the most complete comparison because of the two empires that both of them had built, but it's just mostly saying that there's something else for them to derive. And especially again, because Bill Cosby has been married for some time, even so, and if Hugh had been, maybe things would have been completely different since there's been swaths where he isn't. People can, be notable, like, oh, I'm his like little plaything for the month. Even if that was going on, especially as, the fame kind of grew and became more of a spotlight on Bill himself, he probably couldn't have afforded to be known to be out, frolicking so much. So yeah, so there's just a couple run of the mill thoughts about the two, and just folks say, well, how come Hughes getting strung up this because he's white and Bill's black? Well, it's really a yes and a no. It's yes that it's a racial thing in the sense that, well, again, like I said previously, the paying for it. I think one of the first thoughts that I had was like the story kind of really came out and you started getting a lot of the initial foundation to it. It just seemed like, you were just kind of banging them and being really, it's allegedly being questionable in terms of like maybe sedating them or adding, drugs or something to their drinks. Maybe you could have, just have said, look, I want to get on with you, or, maybe slid it to them, but then, there's like an envelope with like $1,000 in it. Like you got known for like, because like, I mean, it's you change like women, their sexuality, in entertainment, actresses, models, you know, you're there's a ticking clock, and so there might be maybe on either party or neither feeling insulted for like either giving someone an envelope with money or not giving or not being on the receiving end of it. But I almost wonder would that have saved him some trouble now? Like he got known for, putting you up in a loft or, but if you're just drugging and sexing allegedly, then is there really any time to nurture that or to even like suggest that? Because then you would just have to have known that it might come back to bite you in the ass one day. And, but obviously at the time he wouldn't have had any idea of that. Um, so yeah, so that is one of the racial aspects to it. You know, was there a part of him was like, oh, they really want to be with this, hot up and coming black guy. I can like dope him up a little bit, whatever. But I ain't paying these hoes. Now I think Bill Cosby would ever say a word or say something in that way, but it just seems like in the end, no, they probably just weren't all that taken with you, and then maybe I don't want to branch off into that. So it just would have been maybe different had he just, you know, slip them envelope of money or like, make sure one of them gets as a production assistant on this or that, or maintain business relationships so that you could always like, so you're getting this sexual favors, you're getting a young woman, but especially in a scene like that, like there has to probably be some type of trade-off. And because, maybe the one who felt whatever about it, maybe with Hugh or someone else, when they got a gig, or over the years, like, when they needed a little bit of help or they needed like their rent paid or they were having car troubles or they really wanted a role and they needed, whatever. If something along that larger Playboy empire was there to provide that, it probably minimized, and it's just one factor that may have minimized the potential of a bunch of women coming out later saying, hey, you drugged me and I wasn't, because I guess that's something that's often said with a lot of the rape allegations, especially the ones that turn out to be frivolous or just they're embellished to a point where it's basically you really didn't want to sleep with the person, you kind of did out of pity or just whatever. The next day you're like, ah. So that's one aspect of it too. So I don't want to go too long into this. So I'll just kind of round back out a few final points. So there's the Playboy had a lot more of a cross cultural influence than Bill Cosby independently with the work that he did. So when women later on may have alleged so much about Cosby versus Hugh, one theory that argues that there may be the same types of like jiltedness, feeling kind of like drugged or abused or put upon allegedly. But I'd imagine that an empire like Playboy was able to absorb a lot of those women along the way. Some went about their business, some stayed around the mansion, the magazine, the empire, and were able to kind of get tangential benefits from, sex that they may or may not have wanted to have, but it likely became something that, for some, that there was such other side benefit to being aligned with that type of power and influence, especially in entertainment, in adult industry, porn, that whole sphere that Playboy inhabited for quite some time in the culture, that was there. So then 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, someone like with Cosby, just kind of there as a party to a universe that's been created and cultivated by someone like Hugh versus, him and coming into contact with women here in this scene that's of someone else's creation. So I don't think that, so they're different because they are different. Bill Cosby might have fared a lot better had he actually either paid these women in a financial sense, a little envelope at the end of the day or the night, or had something through his influence in Hollywood to offer, as a benefit, roles in films. Um, if he had something like akin to Playboy, some type of business that he could have maybe found a way to filter any kind of jilted or disgruntled women through, at least a fair amount of them, then that might have changed whether or not, like, was it like 10 to 15, 15, 20 women now in the heat of this kind of Me Too culture. And basically, you know, I mean, these things have been out there for some time from what I understand, but basically the past like year or two, just this fell swoop at him. So I'll just leave it there. I'll just leave that there. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you again soon.